At couples therapy, she said, I'm here to figure out if he's worth keeping or if I should find someone better. I said, good question, stood up, and left. Later, she texted, can we talk? I replied, you're still figuring things out. I already did, and blocked her. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. The leather of the armchair was cool against my palms. I focused on that sensation, on the faint, clean scent of the therapy office, on the diplomas on the wall behind Dr. Evans's head. Anywhere but on Mia, sitting a careful 3 feet away in the matching chair, scrolling through her phone. This had been my idea. My last, desperate play. 5 years together, and for the last 6 months, it felt like I'd been living with a polite stranger. Conversations had become logistical briefings. Affection, when it came, felt like a distant cousin of the real thing, a duty, not a desire. I'd suggested couples therapy not as an accusation, but as a bridge, a neutral space to find the us that had gotten lost. I'd been hopeful, anxious, sure, but hopeful. Mia had agreed with a shrug. If you think it'll help, she'd said, her tone suggesting she was humoring me. Now, in the room, her body language screamed a different story. She was a fortress, arms crossed, one ankle bouncing with impatient energy. She'd put her phone down only when Dr. Evans, a woman with kind eyes and a calm voice, had entered the room. Thank you both for coming, Dr. Evans began, settling into her chair. This is a space for openness, without judgment. Jake, she said, turning to me, you suggested these sessions. Can you share what you're hoping we can achieve here? I took a steadying breath. I want to understand, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I feel like we're coasting. Like roommates who share a bed. I miss the connection. I'm here to learn how to rebuild it, to hear what Mia needs that she's not getting, and to figure out how to be a better partner. It was vulnerable. It felt like laying my chest open on the table between us. I risked a glance at Mia. She was examining a fingernail. Dr. Evans nodded. Thank you for that honesty, Jake. Mia. She turned. What about you? What are your hopes for our time together? Mia let out a short sigh, as if the question was a minor inconvenience. She uncrossed her arms and finally looked at the therapist, not at me. Look, I think I just need help figuring something out. Her voice was flat, analytical. It was the tone she used to compare insurance plans. Dr. Evans leaned forward slightly. Figuring something out? Yeah. Mia's gaze flicked to me for a split second, not with emotion, but with assessment. Like she was evaluating a piece of furniture. I'm here to figure out if he's worth keeping, or if I should just cut my losses and find someone better. The air was vacuumed from the room. The words didn't slice, they crystallized. They hung in the space between us, perfect, grotesque diamonds of absolute truth. Worth keeping. Cut my losses. Someone better. A memory, unbidden and cruel in its timing, flashed behind my eyes. It was 2 years ago. Mia had a major presentation due at dawn. Her laptop had crashed at 11 p.m., the file corrupt. She was in tears, paralyzed by stress. I'd made her tea, sat her on the couch with a blanket, and taken the hard drive. I worked until 4 a.m., recovering scraps of data, rebuilding slides from her notes, formatting it all. I presented it to her, finished, just as the sky was lightening. She'd hugged me, mumbled, "You're my hero," and fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep. I'd gone to my day job on 2 hours of rest, bone-tired but buoyant. I had fixed it. That's what I did. I was the fixer. The reliable one. Now, in this sterile room, I understood. She hadn't seen a partner that night. She'd seen a tool. A useful, dependable tool. And now she was in the market for an upgrade. Dr. Evans's professional composure cracked for a microsecond, her eyes widening. I see, she said, her voice careful. That's a very final way of framing the purpose of therapy, Mia. Mia shrugged, the motion effortless. It's just being realistic. Time's ticking. I need to know if this, she made a loose, circular gesture between her chair and mine, a gesture that encompassed our home, our history, my love, is the best I can do. The best I can do. The finality of it was breathtaking. This wasn't a crisis. This wasn't a painful struggle. This was a cost-benefit analysis, and I was in the red. The love, the history, the quiet sacrifices, they weren't assets in her ledger. They were sunk costs. The cold that had started in my chest during her first sentence spread outwards, reaching my fingers, my scalp. But it wasn't the cold of shock. It was the cold of clarity. Absolute, penetrating clarity. The fog of hope, of confusion, of what did I do wrong, evaporated in an instant. She had just handed me the answer. She wasn't here to build. She was here to decide if the foundation was worth the salvage. She had made me a subject in my own trial. The calm that settled over me was deeper than any ocean. I looked at Dr. Evans, who was watching me with cautious empathy. I looked at Mia, who was now looking back at me, a faint challenge in her eyes, as if waiting for me to crumble, to beg, to justify my worth. I did none of those things. I placed my hands on the arms of the chair and pushed myself up to my full height. I smoothed the front of my jacket, a simple, automatic gesture. I felt strangely light. Thank you for your time, Dr. Evans, I said, my voice even, quiet, and carrying perfectly in the still room. I believe my partner has just clarified the objective of these sessions. I turned my head toward Mia. And I'm not interested in being audited. I met her eyes. I let her see nothing. No pain, no anger, no plea. Just an empty reflection of her own appraisal. I gave her the faintest, most meaningless nod. Good question, I said, echoing her clinical tone. I hope you find your answer. I turned and walked to the door. My footsteps were silent on the plush carpet. I opened the door, stepped into the bland hallway, and closed it softly behind me. There was no slam, no dramatic exit, just the gentle, definitive click of a latch engaging. The hallway was quiet. The only sound was the low hum of the building's HVAC. I walked past abstract art and potted plants, out the main doors, and into the afternoon sun. In my car, I sat for a full minute, hands on the wheel. The silence was total. The numbness began to recede, not into hurt, but into a staggering, unburdened realization. It was over. It had been over for months, maybe years. She had just finally read the verdict aloud. I started the car. The engine purred to life. I didn't drive toward our shared home. I drove toward the river, toward nowhere in particular. I was already gone. The river was a sheet of dull steel under the gray sky. I drove along the parkway, windows down, letting the cold air scour the last clinging vestiges of that room from my skin. There was no soundtrack of angsty music in my head, no internal monologue of rage or grief. There was just the hum of the engine, the rush of wind, and a vast, quiet emptiness where the wound was supposed to be. I didn't go home. Our home. The word was already obsolete, a relic. Instead, I drove to Alex's place. My oldest friend. I didn't call ahead. I parked, walked up to his door, and knocked. He opened it, holding a sandwich. Jake? Weren't you at your? He saw my face. It wasn't tear-stained or twisted. It must have been something else, hollow, resolved, because his casual expression vanished. What happened? It's done, I said, walking past him into the familiar clutter of his bachelor apartment. Can I crash on your couch for a few days? Of course. Man, of course. He put the sandwich down. What did she say? I sat on the edge of his sofa. The reality of it was beginning to solidify, not as an emotional tragedy, but as a logistical problem to be solved. In front of the therapist, she said she was there to figure out if I was worth keeping or if she should find someone better. I recited it flatly, a news headline from a distant country. Alex stared, his mouth agape. She said that? In therapy? Yeah. What did you do? I stood up, thanked the therapist, and left. A slow, incredulous smile spread across Alex's face. He shook his head. Cold. Ice cold. I'm sorry, Jake. But damn, that's the most dignified exit I've ever heard of. It wasn't dignity, I said, looking at my hands. It was physics. There was nothing left to say. The equation was solved. I took out my phone. I saw 3 missed calls from Mia and a string of texts. I didn't read them. I opened a new message. To Mia, I've left. Your things are undisturbed. I won't be returning. All further communication regarding logistics can go through my email. I hit send. Then I went into my settings, selected her number, and tapped block this caller. The action was clinical, effortless. It felt less like an emotional severance and more like deleting a redundant app. The phone rang immediately. Alex glanced at it. It's her. I know. I watched it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. Then a third time. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was profound. It was the sound of a door closing in a distant wing of a house you've already moved out of. "You're not going to, I don't know, get your stuff?" Scream at her. "Something?" Alex asked, still looking shell-shocked. "No." I stood up. "But I need to go there now. While she's still at the therapist's office, or maybe driving around looking for me. I need a bag. And my documents." The drive back to the house felt like visiting a museum. The museum of my former life. Every landmark. The corner store where we'd buy overpriced ice cream. The park where we'd walked her dog until it passed away last year. Had been stripped of sentiment. They were just coordinates on a map. The house was empty and quiet. It didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a set after the play has ended. I went upstairs and packed a single, large duffel with practiced efficiency. A week's worth of clothes, my toiletry kit, my passport, financial folders, my laptop and charger. I took the small fireproof box from the back of my closet. I left everything else. The framed photos on the dresser, the book I was reading on my nightstand, the sweatshirt she always stole. They were artifacts. I was an archaeologist leaving the dig. On the kitchen counter, I placed my key next to the fruit bowl. I didn't write a note. My text was the note. My absence was the epilogue. As I turned to leave, my eyes fell on a small, framed sketch on the wall by the door. It was of the house, done by a street artist on our first anniversary. A sentimental impulse buy. For a fraction of a second, a feeling tried to surge, a ghost of pride, of belonging. I acknowledged it, then let it pass. I walked out, duffel bag in hand, and closed the door for the last time. The next week was a lesson in quietude. Alex's couch was uncomfortable, but I slept deeper than I had in months. I took a personal week from work. I didn't spend it weeping or drinking. I spent it moving. I found a realtor. I explained the situation with a detached calm that made her blink. "I need to sell the house. It's a joint asset. My partner has moved on emotionally, and I need to dissolve the physical entanglement. Speed and efficiency are the priorities." We listed it on Thursday. By Monday, we had 3 competitive offers. The market was hot. My boring obsession with maintaining the roof and landscaping was about to pay off. I rented a small, modern apartment downtown. It had a view of anonymous buildings and a sliver of sky. It was clean, empty, and mine. I bought a bed, a desk, a chair. That was it. The emptiness was luxurious. I went back to the gym, not to punch away anger, but to reclaim a rhythm my body had forgotten. The burn in my muscles, the metric of progress on a treadmill screen, was honest. It was a problem with a solution. Lift, run, repeat. Improve. I reconnected with friends, one by one. I didn't hold court or trash Mia. When asked, I said the same thing. "It's over." She decided it wasn't working. I agree. My calm unnerved some of them. They were braced for a storm, and I offered them a placid lake. They filled the silence with their own assumptions, which suited me fine. The first ripple of the outside world came via Sarah, a mutual friend who had always been more mine than ours. We met for coffee. "How are you doing, Jake?" she asked, her eyes searching for cracks. "I'm okay. Really. Getting settled." She's telling people you had a nervous breakdown, that you walked out of therapy and just vanished, that you're giving her the silent treatment." I took a sip of coffee. I walked out after she told the therapist she was deciding whether to keep me or trade up. I texted her I was leaving. I blocked her number to focus on disentangling our lives. That's not a silent treatment. That's a conclusion. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "She said that? She told us you weren't engaging with the process." The air quotes were vicious. "Jake, that's horrific." It was clarifying. I corrected, my voice even. "Well, she's not exactly thriving on her new clarity," Sarah said, leaning in. "She's already seeing someone. Some guy named Leo. He's in business development. Drives an Audi he leases. He's all over her Instagram." I felt nothing. Not a twinge. It was like hearing a weather report for a city I'd never visit. Good for her. "It's not, though," Sarah pressed, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "I ran into them at the Oak last weekend. He talked at her the whole time. Name dropped. He ordered for her without asking. She just sat there, smiling this tight little smile. She looked like she was playing a part and forgetting her lines." I nodded. "I hope she finds what she's looking for." Sarah sat back, studying me. "You're really done, aren't you?" I met her gaze. "Yes." The second ripple came 2 weeks later, via text from another friend, Ben. "Ben, Heard from Lisa that Mia's new dude is a lot. Apparently yelled at a waiter last night because the wine was corked. It wasn't. Mia was mortified. Whole thing was messy. I typed back, thanks for the update. And I meant it. It was data. It confirmed the trajectory. The house sale closed. The money hit the account. My lawyer, a stoic woman who appreciated my lack of hysterics, handled the split with brisk efficiency. The final tether was cut. I set up my new, sparse apartment. I hung no pictures. The silence was my companion, and it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I worked longer hours, not out of avoidance, but because I found a new focus. Projects I'd put off for years, a professional certification, a coding language I wanted to learn, suddenly had space and mental bandwidth. I was moving through the world lighter. The weight I'd been carrying wasn't the weight of the relationship. It was the weight of her appraisal, her dissatisfaction, the constant, low-grade audit of my worth. With that gone, I could simply be. One evening, sitting in my quiet apartment, watching the city lights blink on, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A voicemail icon appeared. I knew who it was. I played it on speaker while I chopped vegetables for dinner. Mia's voice filled the room, strained and watery, so unlike her clinical tone from the therapy office. Jake, it's me. Please. I need you to call me back. It's important. Leo, it's not what I thought. I'm in a bad spot. Please, just call me back. The knife in my hand continued its steady, rhythmic thump 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 against the cutting board. I finished the carrot, swept it into a bowl, and reached for my phone. I didn't delete the voicemail. I saved it. Then I deleted the call log from the unknown number. I sat down to eat my dinner in the quiet. The food tasted good. The silence felt like mine. The middle wasn't a place of waiting. It was a place of building. And the foundation, for the first time in a long time, felt solid. The voicemail was a pebble dropped into the still pond of my new life. There was a ripple, not of emotion, but of recognition, and then the surface smoothed back to perfect glass. I didn't replay it. I didn't analyze the tremor in her voice. I saved it in a digital folder labeled Utilities, alongside the PDF of my apartment lease and my car insurance documents. It was just another piece of administrative data from a closed account. Life didn't pause for her crisis. Mine accelerated. The certification exam I'd been studying for, I passed, landing in the 95th percentile. My boss, a man of few words, called me into his office. Notice the focus, Jake. The Edwards account was flawless. We're creating a new senior strategist role. It's yours if you want it. The promotion came with a significant raise and a sleek new title that would look good on a business card I'd never bothered to order. I accepted with a handshake. My success felt quiet, personal, and entirely divorced from anyone's approval. Meanwhile, the reports from the front lines of Mia's upgrade trickled in, no longer as ripples, but as persistent, low-grade signals of a system failure. Sarah met me for a drink, her expression a mix of pity and grim satisfaction. You were a prophet, Jake. Leo is a nightmare. I sipped my sparkling water. Oh, he's not in business development. He's a glorified salesman for a supplement company that's basically a pyramid scheme. He tried to recruit my cousin. The Audi got repoed last week. Turns out he was 3 months behind on the lease. I nodded. This was unsurprising. Flash without substance was a house of cards in a stiff breeze. And he's mean, Sarah continued, lowering her voice. Not physically, but verbally. Nitpicks everything about her. Her clothes, her friends, the way she talks. Lisa said Mia withdrew $5,000 from her savings to invest in his business venture last month. The money's gone. Poof. That's unfortunate, I said, the word bland and neutral. Sarah shook her head. Unfortunate? Jake, she's drowning. She looks 10 years older. All her friends are either fed up with her for ditching you and then complaining, or they're scared of Leo. She's totally isolated. It was a perfect, self-inflicted karma. She had sought someone better, defined by flash and audacity, and found a hollow man who mirrored her own worst instincts. Judgmental, transactional, and fundamentally unstable. She had traded a harbor for a leaky dinghy painted to look like a yacht, and was now shocked to find herself taking on water. The second contact attempt came a few days later, again from an unknown number. A text, this time longer, more narrative. Unknown number, Jake. I know you're getting these. Please. I made a mistake. A huge one. Leo is not the man I thought he was. He's controlling, and the money is all gone. What we had was real. I see that now, so clearly. I'm so sorry for what I said in therapy. I was scared of settling, but I was such an idiot. You were my home. Just call me back. Please. We can fix this. I read it once. The language was telling. What we had was real. Past tense. You were my home. Also past tense. But the plea was for a present rescue. She wasn't nostalgic for me. She was desperate for the safety I represented. The life raft. The fixer. The apology was not for the cruelty, but for miscalculating my utility. I highlighted the entire message and tapped delete. No response. The power in silence is that it offers no ledge for the other person to grip. It is a sheer, frictionless wall. Her social media, which I never sought out, but was shown by a bewildered mutual friend, told its own story. The glossy, filtered photos with Leo had stopped. Now it was a barrage of cryptic, angsty quotes about betrayal, self-discovery, and learning the hard way who's really there for you. The comments were sparse. The facade had cracked, and the audience had moved on. The third attempt shifted in tone. Desperation, when met with silence, often curdles into entitlement. It came late on a Tuesday night. A voicemail. Her voice was no longer watery. It was sharp, brittle with fury. Fine. Be a child. Ignore me. But we need to talk for closure. You don't just get to walk away from 5 years without a proper conversation. That's cowardly. I deserve closure, Jake. Call me. Stop hiding. I played it for Alex, who had become my unofficial archivist of the collapse. He snorted into his beer. Closure? She told a therapist she was doing a cost-benefit analysis on your humanity. What's more closed than that? Exactly, I said. Closure wasn't a conversation she needed from me. It was a realization she needed to have about herself. My walking away was the closure. Her demand for a proper conversation was just a last-ditch attempt to re-enter the arena, to force an interaction where she could perhaps manipulate, guilt, or reassert some form of control, to prove she still mattered enough to provoke a reaction. I didn't save this voicemail. I erased it. Her anger was irrelevant noise. The final piece of the karma puzzle clicked into place via a local business news alert I followed. Local supplement company Vitality Max, raided by state authorities, pyramid scheme allegations. I clicked the article. There, in a grainy screenshot from the company's own website, was a familiar smarmy face, Leo, posing with a thumbs up next to a tower of protein powder tubs. The article detailed the fraudulent recruitment structure, the false health claims, and the impending lawsuits against its top ambassadors. A text from Ben arrived minutes later. Did you see the news? That's Leo's business. Total scam. He's gonna get sued into oblivion. I typed back, I saw. Thanks. I imagined the scene at whatever apartment they shared. The panic. The recriminations. The final, devastating confirmation that her better was not only abusive, but a literal fraud. Her judgment, her entire new identity built on this choice, was now publicly, legally, and financially annihilated. It was the ultimate mirror. She had sought to trade up, and in doing so, had revealed her own profound lack of discernment. The world now saw it, too. My own life, in stark contrast, felt like a smooth, upward trajectory. My new apartment was no longer sparse. It was curated, filled with things I genuinely loved. A high-quality sound system for the jazz I'd rediscovered, shelves of books I was actually reading, a comfortable chair for the quiet evenings I cherished. I was in the best shape of my life. My work was fulfilling and recognized. The peace was no longer an absence of noise, but a positive presence. The stage was set. She was in freefall, stripped of her new man, her savings, her pride, and her narrative. I was anchored, prosperous, and at peace. She knew where to find me. I went to the same coffee shop every Saturday morning to read. It was a habit, a small pleasure. I didn't do it to be seen. I did it because I liked their coffee and the light from the big front window. The following Saturday, as I was underlining a passage in a book on maritime history, I felt the weight of a stare. It was a familiar, haunting pressure I hadn't felt in months. I looked up slowly. She was standing just inside the door, clutching a thin jacket around herself despite the mild weather. Mia. But not the Mia from the therapy office, all cold calculation. Not the Mia from the early Leo-era Instagram posts, performing happiness. This was a ghost of those women. Her eyes were shadowed, her face drawn. She looked brittle, like a strong wind would shatter her. She was staring at me as if I were a mirage in a desert she was lost in. Our eyes met. Hers widened, flooded with a complex torrent of hope, shame, and desperation. She took a hesitant step, then another, weaving through the scattered tables until she stood before mine, a world of ruin in her posture. "Jake." I closed my book, careful to keep my place with a finger, and looked up. "Mia." I said her name the way I might acknowledge a vague acquaintance from a forgotten job. There was no warmth, no chill, just identification. She flinched at the tone, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "You're hard to get a hold of." "I've been busy." It wasn't an excuse or a barb. It was a simple fact, as neutral as stating the time. Her eyes darted around, taking in my relaxed posture, my good wool sweater, the quiet confidence that comes from peace. She looked like she'd been sleeping in her car. The contrast was a physical presence at the table. "I need to talk to you," she blurted, the words tumbling out in a rush. "About us. About how things ended. I never got to say my piece. You just left." I tilted my head slightly. "You said everything that needed to be said. In front of a professional witness." It was very clarifying. I used her own clinical language, holding it up like a mirror. She flushed, a blotchy red climbing her neck. "I was wrong, okay? Is that what you want to hear?" Her volume rose, drawing a glance from a woman at the next table. Mia didn't seem to notice. Leo was a mistake. A huge, catastrophic mistake. I was a mistake. She leaned forward, her eyes pleading now. "What we had, it was special. It was real. Don't you think we owe it to ourselves to try and talk this out? To see if there's anything left? After 5 years, we at least deserve that." She was performing. The script was different, desperation instead of disdain, but the stage was the same. She was still trying to direct the scene, to force a dialogue where she could negotiate her way back to safety. I placed my book down on the table. I gathered my phone, my wallet, my keys. The actions were slow, deliberate, final. I stood up, and for the first time, I looked at her from a position of not just emotional, but physical height. The power dynamic was no longer a concept. It was a fact in the space between us. Her face was upturned, a mask of hope and fear. She was waiting for the lifeline. I looked at her and let her see the absolute, unclouded emptiness in my eyes. There was no hatred there to hold on to, no lingering love to rekindle. There was nothing. She was looking into a quiet, sunlit room where she no longer had a place, or even a memory. "You told Dr. Evans," I began, my voice calm, firm, and lethally clear, "that you needed to figure out if I was worth keeping." I paused, letting the grotesque memory of that sentence hang in the coffee-scented air between us. She blanched, her mouth opening slightly. "It took me about 10 seconds after you said that," I continued, my tone conversational, almost gentle, "to figure out you weren't." She recoiled as if slapped. The hope in her eyes shattered, replaced by a dawning horror. "You're still figuring things out, Mia?" I gave her a small, meaningless nod. It was the same nod I'd given her in the therapist's office. A period at the end of a sentence. I already did. I didn't wait for a reply. There was nothing she could say that would matter, no counter-argument that could reach me. I turned and walked towards the door. My footsteps were steady on the hardwood floor. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel her devastation like a change in atmospheric pressure behind me. A small, localized storm I was simply walking out of. I pushed open the door and stepped into the bright, ordinary Saturday morning. The air outside was fresh. I took a deep breath, feeling the sun on my face. The encounter hadn't rattled me. It had rinsed me. The last ghost was laid to rest. My phone buzzed in my pocket. An hour later, sitting in a park, I checked it. A torrent of texts from another new number, a chaotic spill of emotion, apologies, accusations, more pleas, then finally, fury. "You're a heartless monster. You were never enough. I'm better off without you." I read them with detached curiosity, like an anthropologist studying the ritual distress calls of a lost tribe. They confirmed everything. The apology was always just a pathway back to the familiar territory of blame. I didn't block this number. I simply deleted the thread and set my phone to ignore all calls from numbers not in my contacts. She would forever be shouting into a void of her own making. A week later, I had a dinner date with Alara, the brilliant, kind woman from the architecture firm I'd met through a work project. We went to a small Italian place. Overshared tiramisu, she asked. So, what did you do today? Had a very good coffee, I said, smiling. Finished a book. And I realized something. What's that? That the past has a funny way of becoming irrelevant. Not painful, not happy. Just data. It loses its power when you stop feeding it. She smiled, her eyes warm and understanding. That sounds like peace. It is, I said, and I meant it. Later, as I walked her to her door, my phone buzzed once more in my pocket. A final, solitary text from the void. I just need to know you're okay. It was the ultimate, transparent gambit. A hook baited with faux concern. I didn't even pull my phone out to look. The vibration was a distant, insignificant tremor, like a pebble falling on the other side of a vast, calm lake. I kissed Alara goodnight, a soft, promising kiss that spoke of a present and a future. As I walked back to my car, the night air cool and clean, I thought of Mia not with anger or pity, but with the same indifference I'd feel for a character in a book I'd closed long ago. The plot was resolved. The lesson was learned. The story was over. My story, however, was just beginning. And she was not in it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. What do you think about this story? Share it in the comments.